when a man has no one but God, he stands at a crossroads where faith and despair collide. It is in this moment, when every hand seems withdrawn, when every door seems shut, and when every friend has vanished, that the greatest discovery is made, that the human spirit, when aligned with divine power, cannot be broken. Loneliness has been called the great teacher, because in solitude a man learns who truly governs his destiny. And when a man finds that his only companion, his only confidant, and his only strength is God, he discovers a force within himself that no storm can crush, no enemy can defeat, and no hardship can erase. Most people measure strength by the number of allies one has, the wealth stored away, or the status one holds in society. Yet history reveals a different truth. The men and women who left the most indelible mark on this earth were often those who stood alone, alone in their vision, alone in their conviction, and alone in their pursuit of truth. What carried them through their solitude was not the applause of the crowd, nor the encouragement of friends, but the whisper of God in the silence of their hearts. For when a man has no one but God, he has enough. To be stripped of every earthly support may appear as tragedy to the untrained eye, but to the man of faith it is an initiation. It is a fire that purifies and reveals whether his hope rests in men, or whether it rests in the Creator. The one who depends on people for his strength will collapse when people abandon him. The one who depends on God alone will rise even when the world pushes him down. The paradox of life is this: when you are emptied of all human aid, you are filled with divine help. When you lose the false securities, you gain the only security that cannot be shaken. It is easy to profess faith when surrounded by comfort, applause, and support, but real faith is not tested in comfort, it is tested in crisis. When the lights are turned off, when the crowds go home, when the companions walk away, and the silence becomes deafening, then, and only then, does a man come face to face with the reality of his faith. And in that hour, when he cries out to God, he learns that God is not a distant figure or a vague idea, but a living presence, nearer than breath, stronger than fear, and greater than any obstacle. Consider the man who has been betrayed by friends, abandoned by family, misunderstood by society, and stripped of possessions. To the world he may look like a failure, to himself he may feel forsaken. Yet if in that dark hour he turns his heart upward and says, "Though the world has left me, I still have God," he has discovered the hidden wealth of the universe. He may own nothing, yet he possesses everything. For all the power, wisdom, and guidance of God become his inheritance when he surrenders completely. The strongest men and women are not those who never knew isolation. They are those who found God in isolation. Greatness is born in silence, in nights of prayer, in moments of tears unseen by human eyes. The man who has no one but God is being shaped for a higher purpose. Every trial, every rejection, every wound becomes the very tool that chisels his soul into strength. People may pity him, but heaven applauds him, for he has chosen the one foundation that never crumbles. Think of it this way: if a man had all the support of the world but lacked God, what would it profit him? He could gain wealth, friends, and status, yet remain empty, fragile, and insecure. But if he loses all, and yet retains God, he is richer than kings, because his wealth is eternal. The man who has God alone cannot be bribed by fame, cannot be broken by failure, and cannot be bound by fear. He stands free because his trust is anchored in the infinite, not the temporary. In the hours of loneliness, when no voice answers and no hand comforts, God trains the soul to hear his whisper. Silence becomes the classroom of divine wisdom. What appears as abandonment is often preparation. Many cry, "Why has everyone left me?" without realizing that sometimes God removes the noise of people so that his voice can finally be heard. The greatest revelations are seldom given in the crowd. They are given in the cave, the prison, the desert, the secret place where only God is near. When a man has no one but God, he learns the secret of inner authority. He stops begging for validation from others, because he realizes that his worth comes from above. He stops fearing rejection, because he has already faced the greatest loneliness and found that God was enough. He stops chasing approval, because the approval of heaven outweighs the applause of men. This man becomes unshakable, for he has faced the storm alone and found that he was never truly alone. There is a hidden blessing in having no one but God. It forces a man to grow, to stretch, to dig into the unseen reserves of strength placed within him by the Creator. Without this stripping away, he might have leaned forever on people, never knowing the power of faith. But once he discovers it, he becomes a new creature, stronger than before, wiser than before, freer than before. The chains of dependence on human approval are broken, and he rises with a new kind of liberty. Great achievements in history were born from men who seemed utterly alone. Inventors, leaders, prophets, and visionaries stood in the face of ridicule, without the comfort of the masses. They pressed on, not because people believed in them, but because they believed in the unseen hand of God guiding their path. What would have crushed another man lifted them. What would have silenced another man gave them a voice. And their voice still echoes today, reminding us that the man who has God is never truly outnumbered. Loneliness is not always an enemy, sometimes it is a gift. For when a man is alone with God, he is in the company of the greatest teacher, the wisest counselor, the most faithful friend. He may walk through the valley of shadows, but he does not walk alone. He may face the fire, but he does not burn alone. He may endure betrayal, but he is never without companionship. This realization transforms loneliness into strength, despair into courage, and abandonment into destiny. So, if you find yourself in the place where no one stands beside you, do not curse the moment. Embrace it. It is in that place that men are forged into giants. It is in that place that weak faith grows into unshakable confidence. It is in that place that dreams are revealed, character is purified, and destiny is awakened. You may feel deserted, but you are not abandoned. You may feel small, but you are being made strong. You may feel invisible, but heaven has its eyes upon you. When a man has no one but God, he holds the greatest advantage possible, for though people may walk away, God remains. Though resources may vanish, God provides. Though strength may fail, God sustains. He becomes a man who can walk into any battlefield of life with the calm assurance that he is never truly alone, and in that assurance he finds victory that no crowd could ever give and no enemy could ever take away. When a man has no one but God, he begins to understand the mystery of strength that comes not from the outside, but from within. He finds that his prayers grow deeper, not because he is trying to impress anyone, but because he knows there is only one listening who matters. He no longer speaks words of faith to sound righteous before people, but to sustain his very soul. He discovers that prayer is not a ritual, but a lifeline, not a performance, but a conversation with the source of life itself. And in this discovery, his inner being becomes unshakable, because he knows he is rooted in something that never fails. There are moments when the silence feels unbearable, when the absence of human comfort presses against the mind like a weight. Yet those very moments, when endured, reveal treasures hidden beneath the surface. The man learns to wait, to trust, to lean not on his understanding, but on divine wisdom. He realizes that the absence of men's voices makes room for the clarity of God's voice. What once looked like abandonment becomes a school of transformation, shaping him into someone he never thought he could be. Think of the seed buried deep in the earth. Alone, hidden, unseen, it appears forgotten. But within that soil, a miracle takes place. Pressure, darkness, and solitude awaken life within it. Soon it pushes upward, breaking the ground, reaching toward the light. So it is with the man who has no one but God. His solitude is not death. It is preparation for growth. He may feel buried, but in reality he is being planted. And when the season is right, he will rise stronger, greater, and more fruitful than before. The greatest battles of life are often fought in secret. No crowd cheers, no friend applauds, no one notices the struggle but God alone. The tears shed in silence, the prayers whispered in the night, the doubts wrestled within the heart. These are the battles that build the strongest souls. When a man emerges from such battles with God as his only ally, he carries a strength that the world cannot measure. He may walk softly, but his spirit carries authority. He may speak gently, but his words carry weight. He may look ordinary, but his presence commands respect, because he has been shaped by the unseen hand of God. There is a unique kind of courage in the man who has no one but God. He does not fear rejection, for he has already survived it. He does not fear loss, for he has already been emptied. He does not fear loneliness, for he has already made peace with it. This courage makes him unstoppable. What others avoid, he faces. What others fear, he confronts. What others flee, he endures. His faith makes him bold, not in arrogance, but in quiet assurance that he is guided by something higher than himself. And so, the man who has no one but God is not to be pitied, but to be admired. For while others may crumble when stripped of support, he stands taller. While others may collapse under the weight of loneliness, he rises. While others seek comfort in the temporary, he has tapped into the eternal. His story is not one of defeat, but of triumph. His life is not defined by who left him, but by who remained with him when all else was gone, and in the end, that makes him the richest man alive. When a man has no one but God, he begins to see life with a different kind of vision. The noise of the world fades, and what once seemed important loses its power over him. The approval of people no longer dictates his choices, because he has learned to seek a higher approval. He stops chasing after fleeting applause, and instead builds his life on principles that endure. He learns that truth does not need validation from the crowd, and that integrity does not require recognition. His inner compass becomes aligned with divine wisdom, and this makes him steady in a way that those who depend on people can never be. There is a discipline that comes from walking alone with God. It forces a man to listen carefully, to discern patiently, and to act with conviction even when no one stands beside him. Each decision becomes a test of faith, each step a demonstration of trust. While others are swayed by shifting opinions, he is guided by an anchor that holds firm. He may not always know the outcome, but he walks with confidence because he knows who walks with him. This discipline shapes his character into something resilient, something enduring, something that cannot be bent by the storms of life. There are moments when the weight of being alone feels like it will break him, but in those moments he learns that what feels like breaking is really building. The tears that fall in silence water the seeds of wisdom. The prayers uttered with trembling lips strengthen the muscles of faith. The hours of solitude sharpen his awareness of God's presence until he realizes he is never truly alone. What once felt like punishment now feels like privilege. He understands that while people may leave, God remains, and that realization becomes his shield. A man with no one but God learns to rely on an inner strength that does not come from himself, but from above. He becomes aware of the power of persistence, the necessity of patience, and the blessing of endurance. He sees that every trial carries a lesson, and every setback conceals a step forward. His failures stop being final, because he sees them as refinement. His wounds stop being weaknesses, because he sees them as testimonies. His loneliness stops being a curse, because he sees it as a path to deeper connection with the eternal. And when such a man rises from his solitude, he carries with him a presence that cannot be ignored. Others may not understand the depth of his strength, but they will sense it. They will see a light in his eyes that comes not from worldly success, but from divine assurance. They will hear in his voice a conviction that does not come from human confidence, but from trust in something far greater. He becomes a living example that one who has no one but God is never truly outnumbered, never truly forsaken, and never truly defeated. When a man has no one but God, he begins to walk with a kind of freedom that others cannot comprehend. He is not chained to the fear of losing what he never truly possessed. He does not cling to temporary relationships as his lifeline, for he has already discovered a source that never runs dry. His solitude turns into strength, his silence turns into wisdom, and his isolation becomes the soil in which his destiny takes root. He realizes that the world may misunderstand him, but he no longer needs to explain himself, because the one who matters understands completely. In this state, life's struggles no longer crush him, they refine him. Each disappointment is seen as a redirection, each loss as a lesson, and each closed door as protection. His perspective changes because he no longer measures life by what he gains or loses on the outside, but by the growth he experiences on the inside. He stops chasing what others run after, and instead focuses on building what cannot be destroyed. He comes to see that true wealth is not measured in possessions but in peace, not in influence but in intimacy with the divine. The man who has no one but God is not a weak man. He is a man of deep courage because he has faced the greatest fear of all, the fear of being utterly alone, and has discovered that he was never abandoned. That discovery makes him fearless in the face of challenges. He can walk into uncertainty without trembling, because he has already faced the silence of the unknown and found God waiting there. He can endure betrayal without bitterness, because he has already placed his trust in a friend who never betrays. He can lose everything without despair, because he knows he cannot lose the presence that sustains him. Others may look at him and wonder how he endures what would have broken them. They may ask how he keeps moving when every visible support has been stripped away. But the answer is simple. He has learned the art of leaning on the invisible. He has discovered that the unseen is stronger than the seen, that faith is more reliable than sight, and that the presence of God outweighs the presence of men. This knowledge makes him unshakable, immovable, and unstoppable. Such a man becomes an example to all who cross his path. Without boasting, without demanding recognition, he lives a life that testifies to a greater truth, that when everything else is gone, God remains. His story becomes a beacon of hope to the broken, a reminder to the weary, and a challenge to the fearful. People may forget his name, but they will not forget the impact of his faith. And in the end, his life proves a timeless principle. When a man has no one but God, he has everything he will ever need. When a man has no one but God, he learns the deepest truth of life, that all other supports are temporary, but the presence of God is eternal. He may walk through valleys without companions, endure storms without comforters, and face battles without allies, yet he is never defeated because he is upheld by the one who never leaves. His solitude becomes his strength, his silence becomes his song, and his faith becomes his unshakable foundation. And in the end, he discovers that to have God alone is not to have less, but to have more than enough, for in him lies the fullness of courage, peace, and victory.